I think the Trump administration should be locked up. I mean, arrested and sent to jail for kidnapping and child abuse for their policy on immigrants and refugees. To try to change my mind, Julio Riveria came on the program. I don't think it worked. Check it out and be sure to subscribe. This story, I mentioned this briefly yesterday. I just want to recap it very quickly. This mother came to the United States from Guatemala, where she had been raped by a member of the Guatemalan military that was, quote, protecting the town she lived in. She was one of a number of women in this town who were routinely being raped by these soldiers. She fled to the United States with her 3-year-old child, her daughter. She reached the U.S. border and went to an official border entry point, a legal crossing point, as our law specifies a person is supposed to do if they're seeking asylum, and as international law says, but U.S. law says this. She applied for asylum there. Her application was accepted, as it has, it doesn't always have to be, but and then they took her child away from her, and for 8.5 weeks refused to tell her where her daughter was. She later learned that her daughter had been taken to a place called the Hacienda del Sol. It was shut down because the staffers were routinely engaging in child abuse, actually abusing the children. She was, during that period of time, about 8 weeks into this, she was allowed a phone call with her daughter. She literally every day she had been begging, "Where is my daughter?" And finally, after 8 weeks, they gave her a phone call, and when her daughter started crying 2 minutes into the call, the social worker cut the line. That was it. 2 weeks later, she was reunited with her daughter through the efforts of some good lawyers. And, her asylum claim is being processed. This was all done, illegally, essentially, by the Trump administration. Tearing children from their parents. That's not part of the law. That the only time before Trump, the only time in history that has ever been done is when, for example, during the Obama administration, when they thought that the person who was representing themselves as a parent was not actually the parent, that they might be trafficking the child or that they were explicitly abusive. This little girl now, when she's asked questions, gives one-word answers. She's afraid to go outside. She cannot go outside with her mother. She starts screaming and shrieking. She cannot fall asleep unless her mother is holding her, not just in the same room, holding her. The minute mom lets go of her, this little girl wakes up and starts screaming. This is what your tax dollars are paying for. This is what Donald Trump is so proud of. On the line with us is Julio Riveria, the editorial director at Reactionary Times, columnist at Newsmax, American Thinker, and townhall.com, reactionarytimes.com. His Twitter handle, oh yeah, it's Julio. Julio, welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much for having me, Tom.
So, in my opinion, Donald Trump and Mike Pence, and perhaps Kristen Nielsen, the head of DHS, should be arrested and prosecuted for kidnapping and child abuse. What say you?
Okay, first off, to this little narrative framing that you're doing, Tom, trying to make it seem like this is a
This is one of
phenomenon.
probably 3,000 stories, Julio.
This goes back to every president, vice president, and the administration from Bill Clinton in 1997 on.
No,
this is
Julio, I'm sorry. I can't let you just lie on the air like that. Julio, that is not true. Look it up.
Florida's consent decree, which went ahead and allowed for, I think you have, listen, I'm not going to deny.
The only reason legally the children could be separated from their parents was if there was a suspicion of abuse or human trafficking. Donald Trump changed that, and John Kelly went on national television and said the reason we're changing this policy, the reason we're tormenting these children is to discourage parents from showing up at our border with kids.
Well, you know what? That's not the worst idea in the world. I mean, I'm not saying that we should be holding the kids accountable and punish the children. That's an unfortunate byproduct of a broken system.
This is not a broken system. This is a crime.
No, what we need to do, and this speaks to the larger problem, we need to build that wall. We need to enforce our immigration laws domestically.
This is not about immigration. This is about refugee status.
At the end of the day, you're pointing out, one story, and it is an unfortunate story. But when you have thousands, literally thousands of children, there's no way that the United States, we're not, we don't have the infrastructure to support bringing in all these illegals.
That's why you leave them with their parents, Julio.
Unfortunately.
That's why you leave them with their parents. I mean, you got children's prisons now that are being built.
Because it's not our problem, Tom. That's what you fail to see. You know, if we didn't have, you know, our open border policies and sanctuary cities and all these things, if we were sanctioning the people who hire these people and create opportunities for them, paying them under the table, and if we hit them so hard that they would have no economic opportunities, they wouldn't come here. And guess what, Tom? Then it wouldn't be our problem.
Julio, you would still have that's an immigration argument, and thank you for echoing my point. But I'm not talking about immigration here. The majority, we have had negative immigration from the United States over the last 10 years with regard to Mexico. We've got the majority of people who are overstaying their visas, who are coming into this country legally and ending up being here illegally, and in many cases working, are Canadians. The majority, not Mexicans. Canadians. Mexicans have been leaving this country and going back to Mexico. But what this is, well, let me just finish this sentence and then you can react. What this is refugees. Ronald Reagan committed treason by conspiring with Iran to sell them weapons in exchange for their holding hostages to make Jimmy Carter look like a fool to win an election. After that happened, he took that money and he used it to buy weapons to support right-wing governments down in Central America, in Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. Elliot Abrams was right in the middle of this war criminal Elliot Abrams, who Bob Barr, the guy that was just made Attorney General, recommended George Herbert Walker Bush pardon, which he did. And that ruined those countries. Those countries are absolute messes now because of U.S. policy, and their people are coming here as refugees.
Well, listen, Tom, that's another debate. But the whole thing as far as refugees seeking asylum, there's a lot of people that are coming in right now making that claim that are not truly refugees. So we have to really take a deep look into each one of their cases.
I agree. That's why we need more judges. That's why we need more officers investigating these situations. People should have, there should be due process. If somebody comes, with their child and says, I'm a refugee, the police were raping me, my child was threatened, then there should be due process. Trump has dialed back on that. He has not spent the $1 billion that Congress appropriated 2 years ago for this kind of thing. He has not spent that money. He has dialed back on that, and instead he's saying he wants his trophy wall.
It's not a trophy wall. The wall would prevent all these problems going forward.
This woman did not illegally cross the border, Julio. She presented herself at a port of entry in Arizona.
Mm-hmm. That's fine. You're using this one case. But the
vast majority of these children who have been separated came to legal ports of entry.
I understand, but not all of them. Not all of them. This isn't what the bigger problem is. That right now we have to go ahead and say, and you're right, listen, these refugee cases, yes, we need more judges. We need more people looking at these. There's some people that have suffered some horrific atrocities at the hands of some shady governments and, illegal, crime, organized crime figures within their country. And it's horrible. The human trafficking, all of it has to end. But the best path to do that is to go ahead and say, put up that wall and say, listen, America is closed. For right now, it's closed. And if you come into a legal port of entry, yes, then we'll go ahead and review your asylum application.
And steal your child?
Legitimate claim, you'll get it.
And steal your child?
We have too much. We have too much
and
going on.
And steal your child?
What was that?
And steal your child?
Not steal your child. If we
so you're agreeing with me that Donald Trump and Mike Pence should be in jail for child abuse and kidnapping.
And we hold the children for no longer than 20 days, which we have the legal right to keep the parents separated from the children for up to 20 days, I believe, under the Flores consent decree, while these things are going on.
That was only in cases where you suspect child trafficking, Julio, number one. And number two, even 1 day of separation for a 3-year-old can destroy the rest of their lives. That's debatable, but yes, it is horrible. It's horrible. But I don't think that you can put that on the Trump administration. The way that you're trying to frame this is that, we're going to. John Kelly came out and bragged about this. Kristen Nielsen testified before Congress. This is a deterrence policy. This is a brand new thing in the history of the United States. We are going to tear families apart and put children in children's prisons where they're not allowed to be touched. Their parents can't talk to them. I
have a question for you, Tom. When this caravan was coming up, and let me finish this before you cut me off. When this caravan was coming up, and a lot of people were saying that they wanted asylum from whatever Central American country they were coming from, Mexico offered them asylum, and they didn't take it. So at the end of the day, some of the personal responsibility has to fall on the parents as well.
About 3/4 of the people who came up in the last so-called caravan, this group of a little over 1,000 people who came up through Mexico that Donald Trump was hysterical about. Let's say it was 2,000, just before the election.
Like
10. Let's say it was 10,000. More than 70% of them stayed in Mexico. They have not come to the U.S. border.
Well, they should have all stayed in Mexico.
Well, that day may come, but this is a mess that we created. That war criminal Elliot Abrams and the war criminals Ronald Reagan and George Bush Sr. put this thing together, and now you've got Mike Pence and Donald Trump, and I think these guys should be arrested for kidnapping and child abuse.
How are left-wing governments doing in South America right now? How's Venezuela working out for you? How's democratic socialism working?
Julio, I am not a Venezuelan. I'm an American, and I'm concerned about what is being done in my country, and I'm concerned about the fact that Mike Pence and Donald Trump are engaging in kidnapping and child abuse, and proud of it. And they've got people defending them for that.
Listen, there's going to be unfortunate cases like the case that you keep referencing. That's like, I'm sure that's like the needle in the haystack. That's not the majority across the board.
So you think the vast majority of children who are torn apart from their parents for months at a time are just fine with it?
Sure that these kids are not being trafficked in for child abuse, for sexual abuse, for all the horrible things, the atrocities that these poor people face. We have to make sure that at the very least, the one thing we can guarantee them was while they were in U.S. custody was that child was not being raped.
Well, no, we can't guarantee them that because that's why they shut down the center where this woman's child was taken, because they were abusing the children.
I mean, they were not abusing the children.
They absolutely were. It was shut down. Look it up. It's called Hacienda del Sol in Arizona. You can Google it.